This video is about now width and fullness of form and understanding how we can draw forms, especially human forms. This is why this video is in the figure section. And we're looking at how we can determine the thickness of and the width of, let's say for instance, a bicep, or the fullness of the full arm or the forearm, or a calf or a thigh, or the neck of the head. So what I'm going to show you with this video is a visual technique that is more mental than it is actually physically drawing on the paper, even though I'm going to try to demonstrate that and show you. This aligns nicely, this particular technique, axis and width of form, aligns nicely with horizontal and vertical and diagonal alignment. So if you're unfamiliar with that, you should really go back and take a look at that particular video. And you'll understand how we have a very nice balancing, measuring tool in our brain that allows us to visually measure and look for horizontal, vertical, and diagonal alignment, but also axis of width, or what I call axis width and fullness of form. So let me demonstrate that which generally artists do, but they do it in their head, and they draw, as they draw anatomy or draw muscle forms, etc. It works out well for them. Well, this is another technique to put into your tool belt and answer the question of how did artists do that? So let's get started. So the first form I'm going to use, I'm going to draw over here a little bit, is a simple circle, and it could be a sphere too. Actually, we'll call it a sphere rather than a circle, because we're going to deal with specifically form. So we have this very symmetrically drawn, okay, circular form, okay, three-dimensional. I'll draw a little axis, a little line across it, equator if you will, kind of across an ellipse and through here, just to get the feeling of that coming on through here. All right, so we have that. I have that feeling. Now, you ask yourself, what's the widest point? Where's the widest point of this sphere? And in assessing that and analyzing that, we can find pretty quickly that the widest point is really everywhere. We don't really have to do a lot of visual measuring or finagling in our mind to figure that out. So what we do then is, when we look at a form, intuitively, we look generally right at its center point, right in through here, okay? And then we do a quick peripheral scan. It's almost like you're blurring your vision. I don't want you to go cross-eyed or blind, okay, doing this, but we blur our vision a little bit, and we look out into our peripheral vision way out here as we look at the center. So you're doing this double take right off the bat. So if you don't know what I'm really talking about, try looking at straight in front of you and then focus on the outside edges of whatever you're looking at, the room or whatever, and don't focus on the middle, even though you can still see it. It will be blurry, but what you're really looking for are the widths or edges out with the room, for instance. In this case, we use it as a form. So what we do is we look then at the center of a form. Here's our eye in through here, right? We come down with our eye over through here, and it's kind of just a diagram. So this is the artist looking over at the object, and what we notice is, really quickly, as we scan the object, the widest part of the form are on the edges, but because we're using a sphere to begin with, no matter where you draw or where you see the width of the farthest bulge of the object, it's all going to be the same. So on a sphere, since it's symmetrical, it will be widest at every noticed inflection point or measuring point visually. So I could flip this around and can completely go all around it. It's a very perfect symmetrical object, the ball or the planet. or the beach ball, or whatever it is that you want to name it or call it. Okay, so we have that object. Now the next object I'll put out here gets us a little bit further into this idea, even though it's going to be symmetrical. So I'm going to draw it over here, and it's going to be the egg form. Okay, so we have the egg form here, the back part of the ball, kind of a chicken egg form actually. Here, coming downwards, over, through here, okay, and through, and then around to the end of the sort of an eggy symmetrical geometric sort of form through here. All right, okay, now, so what we see here, there's kind of two tricky ways about this, is what we see. This whole idea. So the first thing we want to do with this idea, and we'll apply it to the figure in a little bit, we'll get there, just bear with me, okay, is we'll take a look at the center of the object. So the first thing I want to do, and I'm just going to diagram this, what's going on in my mind, is I'm going to take a look at the center. So I'll draw an eye over here again, okay, coming over, so we can see the eyeball through here with the lash, and all that good stuff over here, and we'll put a pupil, the iris and the pupil, and through here looking over, right, at it. So we're looking down, that's us, the artist. It's your nice eyebrow. Okay, through here maybe a little nose. Then I could go draw a full head. So we're looking over here, right? Now, where's the widest point now? Now we have two inflection points that are widest. One plays off of the sphere. So if we look here simply, quickly, we know that's wide, but there's another point that's actually even wider and more asymmetrical. Can you see it? So if you look here and then scan peripherally, it should be obvious. It's right here to here, all the way over. It is fairly symmetrical, meaning that this comes out at a 90-degree point, like a lot of these can. 90 degrees is not the point of this, but that's just the way it happens, because what's going to happen on muscular form with the human figure, you're going to find that 99% of the time, well really 100% of the time, muscles are asymmetrical, they're not symmetrical. Rarely, if ever, I can't think of one except maybe the eyeball, but I talked to an optometrist this summer as I got my eye checked, and he told me that the actual eyeball itself is not even symmetrical. It can be a little bit wobbly, a little wider, a little bit narrower. He said if you took your eyeball out and you rolled it across the table, it would kind of clunk, 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 clunk. So that's fascinating too. So we really don't have any symmetrical parts to our bone and our muscle anatomy. Pretty wild there. Now, so our peripheral vision, our axis and width vision, we analyzed the center of this form. We found a width here, but what we're really looking for is the maximum. We're looking for the maximum width, and that's here, here to here. Okay, that's what we're looking for, especially there. We could find a width here and here, but I don't want you to get confused. We want to see the first widest bulge. I'm going to say max, and then I'm going to start using this term, this English term called bulge. And bulge means to kind of pop out of something, to extend a form wider. So we have an object here, and then it bulges, kind of gets fatter, and it could come back in if you want, or it could come out. But I want to use that term bulge because it's important in our understanding of what we're trying to demonstrate here. So we have a simple sphere, we have kind of an egg form idea here. Now I want to show you something where we get a little bit more sophisticated. Let's use like a calf muscle here. So let's try this. So we're gonna do a little gesture here of a part of the leg. We're gonna come down here a little bit, like so, and then we're gonna come over. This may be a right calf. Let me see what I'm gonna draw here. Bear with me a moment here. And so this, yeah, okay, up and through and over. Okay, coming on down, and then we'll have this to this. This is going to work out, but you're going to like, how did he know how to get that together? Well, experience and time, but a little bit of also axis and width magic. We'll say that. How about that together? So, all right. So we'll come down here. Okay. Okay, so this will be part of the ankle here on the inside of the foot. Here, the medial malleolus, and this will be the ankle on the outside and through here. Okay, and we'll come on down and finish out that ankle roughly in through here. Foot could be down over in that area. Okay, so now we have a very simplified calf muscle. Now, let's talk about how I got that and why, because this is going to be important now to our study here moving forward with the figure. Let's see if I can get a different color to show you. Now, so the first thing when we look at this form, if we take a look at the center of the object here, okay? So we have our eye. I'll draw another eye. How about that? We'll pull our eye over here. So we're looking as the artist over here. Okay, here's our eye coming over. Just to draw this simple idea so we can see it coming through, and there's our little pupil and iris coming over. So that's us. We're looking over, looking at the forms here, in here, and so on and so forth. So the first thing I do when I analyze a drawing is I look at that form in the center. Then I immediately analyze peripherally where is the widest part of that form. And as you start to understand the human body with all its torquing and twisting, remember from your gesture studies, here, it's moving here, then it's moving across. The figure, human figure is not symmetrical. It's not this anymore. It's this. That's really, really important coming through here. So we'll take this Achilles soleus and attach it onto that calcaneus bone. Right in through there. When I look now at this part of the top part of the calf, the widest part now is here to here. So the reason now to begin to use this technique is to understand, as you draw both from observation and also from imagination, is to realize that the human figure is not symmetrical across. We are not a true spherical form or a true kind of a spherical egg form, a perfect geometric, but we've got asymmetry. And what you'll notice is, in this view of a right leg from the back, we have our widest point of the calf of the gastrocnemius here. If these could split up into two, if you know your anatomy, if you don't, that's okay, it's not important. This would split up into two, but we're not looking at that. What we're looking really for, okay, is this more simple, elegant idea of axis of width. So we have the axis, and now we have where it's true widest part of that form to get. If you're drawing a leg in the future and you draw this part like this and like this, what's the problem? That's symmetrical, truly straight across. It's going to be, I'm telling you, it will always be diagonal. 99% of the time, unless you get into some foreshortened weird position, which can happen. Okay? Now, as we come down the leg and we look further, and this technique, I want to make sure you understand too that these things happen lightning fast. Okay, I'm slowing this down at the speed what happens very fast for somebody who's drawing well to slow it down so you can understand it. But these can go really fast. The next thing we'll look at here is the next form. Okay, we'll bulge this out. Here and here we'll see the next widest point. So if we analyze, we look to the center of the object. Okay, this is more of the lower part of the leg where the soleus is, back in through here in the gastrocnemius too. You're going to find that this part, as we look, okay, is going to be widest, slightly off and tilted the other way. So about right in through here now is our widest point of this lower leg. So what we're doing now, we're getting a stair-step idea. Here, to here. And yet, if you guessed it, it will come back. So we're moving here compositionally back to here. That's what the human figure can give you, this lovely torquing diagonal movement, and then back to here. That's what we're looking for. So you know the widest point now is going to be from here over to here. There's the widest point where I'm making it a little bit darker. So we look to the center, okay, and then we analyze where the widest point is if we're drawing from observation. And you're gonna notice that the widest point is here, okay, to here in this area. Look at the move when we get here, 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 and yep, watch this, the malleolus, or I'm just going to start calling it the ankles again. I don't want to confuse you. Look how it's there now on that torque, that change, that stairs, that gradual, beautiful stair-stepping way downward. Okay, so here's the widest point of the ankles. The ankles are widest, they're highest on the inside of your ankle, the medial side, and they're lower on the outside part of your foot, the ankle. This is the fibula, and this is part of the tibula. Into here, they connect together, okay? And so they move downwards this way. And so what we notice then, if you're doing it, if you're getting it correctly, you're going to have the widths, the axis of widths, after you look at the center, they're going to be on more of a diagonal. They're not going to be straight across, symmetrical, okay? They're going to be moving, channeling that energy, that kind of this torqued idea from moving here, from moving over this way, moving back this way to give you that movement. Okay, we're going to look at some Rubens figures in a moment. We're going to analyze and draw them. I'm going to slow it down and take you through that process. But you're going to find that this moves, this cascades quite nicely here, upwards, etc. And you get this beautiful idea that the human form is not symmetrical, but it's torqued, it's twisted, it turns and moves so we can have a full range of motion for all our parts. And you can analyze this using all kinds of different body parts. It's not just for legs, it's for arms, it's for facial features, it's for the buttock region, everywhere, fingers, hands, and in the micro parts of the human figure, getting into facial features, whatnot. And once you start to see this in the figure, here's the great thing, you can start to see it when you draw other things. It's like, what is its true width in thickness? So how do you do that? Well, you look to the center and then very quickly then gauge the peripheral part. Where does it truly end? Okay, I see far too many students that will draw more symmetrically, and that's a problem, and they're not using horizontal, vertical, diagonal alignment, and they're not using their peripheral axis and width vision. That's going to be very, very important. All right, so it's more kind of like this idea over here, where we've got this oblong kind of thing happening. That's what's going on with muscles. So where's the widest point of this across the form? We know it's here. So this is more for across the form. Well, it's right here. Here, there's your widest point. How did I know that? Well, I'm looking right about here at the center. There's the axis point, right there. And that's how you find that. Drawing heads, drawing forearms, calves, you name it. This will be the technique that you want to use and memorize. It's a real quick technique, but you don't see it on drawings because we're not drawing arrows and diagrams. It's like, wow, how does that move and flow? So what I want to do now is I want to cut out of here, we'll fade out of here, and we'll go and we'll do two Rubens studies from his paintings. Peter Paul Rubens, a wonderful Flemish Belgian artist in the Baroque era period of art history. And he is probably my favorite figure draftsman of just about any era. But in this case, he's certainly a great teacher for us to see how he uses bulging and moving of muscle form to really design beautiful torquing, contwisting, contorted figures in strenuous, stressful, and emotional situations to great artistic and aesthetic advantage. So that's what's coming up. So why don't we cut to that now? We'll start with our first Rubens, and I'll walk you through this slowly and see how you can see how this technique really is a powerful little tool to change your drawing for the better, hopefully very, very, very quickly. That's my goal. All right, let's cut to that. Let's go to the next one, and I'll see you at that one. All right, so here we are. So I've got Rubens' study out here, Leda and Swan. So I'm going to crop in a little bit on it, so I'm not showing the entire image of it. It'll be in the back of this video if you want to do the entire drawing, or the image, which I certainly would hope you do and suggest you do. But just for the sake of time, and for the width of the paper, I just cropped a little bit so we could get closer to it. All right, so here we take off now. Now, obviously, we're going to start the drawing. We'll go back to our tried and true techniques of gesture, which I'm doing here. Quick sketching gesture of the form. So we'll lay in the rhythm and movement and kinetic energy of our model here. And you know, I picked Rubens, the two studies that we're going to look at, because of his genius of really emphasizing the bulgy quality of almost really every part of the body. If you take a look at the head, the pectorals are really split into about 3 sections, and then the breast form is almost a symmetrical sphere, not quad almost, but it's close. The deltoid, or the shoulder region, arm, all of this, he really emphasizes through pushing his own imagination on the figure, either from direct observation, or this might even have been, this particular image, he might have actually drawn completely from his imagination without even using a model. So he's really distorting and abstracting in a way that we don't really become aware of until we get, I think, more advanced in our knowledge, and you realize, well, that's not really what a human figure looks like so much. All right, so I'm just finishing out the gesture now of the pose here, getting a little bit of the leg and the thigh, and using, of course, horizontal and vertical, diagonal alignment and light line. Just figuring out where that knee comes over to the head, getting that in together. And then we'll jump into, we're going to skip, you know, again, the volumetric figure is always something that I never go through a full volumetric hardcore mannequin in my own work because it's just there in my knowledge. But if you need that, you can use that. But it's a good training device to have. So again, just finishing out here, and then we're going to start our technique now. Really peripheral vision and axis and width, and I'll start it on the head here in a moment. We probably won't do a whole lot of this particular arm, we're going to skip the swan kissing Leda there. We'll just take that out a little bit, and we'll take out that rock that her arm is leaning on a little more. So, finishing up here, and then we'll start with width of the head. So this technique is deceptive in that, you know, it's all peripheral, it's all really mental within the artist's frame of reference. This is what goes on in one part of our visual brain, is this whole idea of axis width and peripheral vision, and also horizontal and vertical alignment. Even though you won't show up on a drawing, you won't see it because we want to hide all that because it's not the point of the drawing. But these are the tools, the techniques that we use to make our vision clearer about the figure, about form, and about volume, and about scale and proportion as well. So you'll notice I'll draw this arm in the video. This is a post-editing analysis how big I left that arm. Rubens can be deceptive. Sometimes you'll do it yourself. All right, so now I'm going to take my green. My green is going to be my axis and width lines, and I'm going to use a little triangle for some diagrammatic lines too as well to help you out and to show you what I'm doing here. So with the image of the head now, the first thing I try to look at right at the center. Very quick. This happens very quickly. I'm slowing this down to almost ridiculous slowness. But we look right at the center, so I'll engage you there. And then I'm looking across the form when I look at her, the end of the cranium, all the way over to kind of where the brow is of her skull. That's where the widest point really of the width. Now we've got length too. I'm going to utilize length some in the video. I use it less for length, but because it's mostly about width for our analysis here. But that's where the longest part of this form of her cranium, from the top of the top of the head proper to the chin, over left and right to the brow to the back of the cranial structure before it starts to shorten and come down to the into the spinal column and through there. So that's what I'm seeing. And I analyze that really quickly by looking right at the center and then adjusting over peripherally my eyes and just kind of slightly getting, I wouldn't say it's getting out of focus, it just happens very, very quickly, and then reanalyzing that. And then you can always change that. You'll see I'll change a couple of these positions a little bit later in the video. A refreshing drink there as I'm talking, so to get it more accurate. And then I always want to adjust things after I make the video. I look at the drawing, I'm like, well, that arm is a little bit too big, even though I don't mind it, but I would probably reduce that size. Things of that nature that you're always kind of critical on as well. It's funny, drawing from a video when you're narrating it and drawing it and filming it is different from when you're just able to not worry about anything else and just draw, and it just is a little bit more of a concentrated effort. Certain things you kind of miss while you're narrating. So I'm just going to flesh out a little bit of this head further, and so we can move on to the next form. The chest forms, the rib cage form, etc. I mean, this technique works for all parts of the human figure. It's especially since once we get past the volumetric figure, we become very organic in muscle bulges, egg-type forms or eggy forms, cylinder-type, and eggs, tubes of that nature. And this is where axis and width and peripheral, your vision, really come into play here. So she's got her eye looking down, or even closed, as she engages the swan there. So I'll just get a little nuance of the cheekbone. And I'm actually using this technique too here, but I'm not going to go into all the depth of that specifics because it would be just too slow. But I want to get into a little bit more of the head detail, just enough to give it a purpose here for the video. Lips open at the beak. It's almost like the swan is feeding the human, even though I think they're kissing, they're making out. So the story is Zeus comes to Leda in the form of an animal, in this case the swan, seduces her and makes love to her. And the reason he comes to her in a swan is so that Zeus's wife, I believe it's Athena. I could be incorrect there, but if I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. But that's certainly to hide his intentions. Now we're coming over to the rib cage. So now I'm looking at the center of the rib cage, right in through here for all the parts roughly, and I'm going to analyze now where I think the widest part of that rib cage is. So if I take a look there, really, and I'm going to include the breast for now, this overall width from the nipple down over, it's roughly in that area all the way across width-wise, not length, more so than width. It could work for length too, but I'm looking for more width-wise. So I'm bringing down the back part of the rib cage into the lat, and then right in through here roughly is where I I surmise from this technique where the widest, excuse me, where the widest part of that rib cage, pectoral, breast region, where it all kind of comes together, where we're simplifying the form. I know there's anatomy there, but we're simplifying all this into an egg-like kind of form, and that helps you to see those forms, by the way, too, as well. So now we have this pocket of material bulginess here, where as she leans into and contracts, that's going to pop outward, where the abdominal wall and some fat in through there would be. Most of Rubens' women, female figures are larger Baroque type women. So now we have the breast form. So the breast form, first thing you could think about is just simply draw a circle. Now that's not going to do you at the end, but I'm going to show you here like that can. It's about right, or maybe this piece of roll of tape right in there. I'll kind of just run around it just for practice to show you something. Now that's too perfect. We're not that symmetrical. That's why we use this technique. So we look in the center here, correct? Look here, and then we look our peripheral vision, and where do we notice it the widest? Sometimes it gets pretty close. Well, this breast is squeezed a little bit. It's compressed downward. So it's a little bit wider now in through here, where I'm going to show you coming across this area top to bottom and a little bit more diagonal. So we feel that. So I'll draw this top, get this chin laid in. There we go, where that connects to the pectoral. But so it's crushed a little bit right in this area coming over. It's pretty lengthy and long to emphasize that bowl groove part of it. So right in through and across there. It's pretty wide where that breast is located at. And of course, this is pectoral material, and then the breast attaches to that muscle on top of the pectoral, not underneath, but on top of. There we go, just like so. And so we get that width sitting on top of the breast. It's probably a little bit over largely drawn compared to his, but I'm okay with it as well. I always make little changes. That's just the way things seem to work out. And don't be worried about that in your drawing. If you're making a master studies and analyses, if you're adjusting, changing a little bit, whether you know it or not, putting a little bit of tone on there just to emphasize the roundness of that form, and moving through, and just kind of finishing up with that particular area. So now we can go on and take a look at more of the subforms now of other areas of the abdomen area, rib cage area. Now we'll bring up a little bit of the clavicle area, and then getting into coming in the back of this rib cage, we can continue this entire form all the way over through here and cut in a little bit to the back area and to the lat, and then to the trapezius and the back part of it coming down. And then as you see coming over here now, we see this little pectoral. Look at the center there of the entire form and try to find its widest part. It's kind of straight across for the most, really for the most part. So these can be a little straight at times too as well. They'll just never generally be completely perpendicular to one another, but the forms are moving all over, we're moving all over, and so we're just looking for that widest point. Again, this should happen relatively fast in your drawing. Obviously, I'm slowing it down, quite a bit for instructional purposes, and then you can speed it up as you're comfortable, and really should be. You should draw faster probably than this. So getting the underneath part of the pectoral as it attaches to the rib cage here through, and coming over. So that's that widest part across that width. That really is tremendously wide in that area. Very muscular kind of pectoral. And if you look at it further, it makes these kind of three large egg forms as it's kind of flexed, and that's a very unusual position for anybody to be in. Tucked in, the chin tucked in, resting kind of on the shadow on the part of the pectoral, so bent down
And Rubens really pushes those forms. We could even emphasize that further, but we'll take on now the deltoid, or the shoulder. And so you could start out thinking of it like I'm doing here with just a circle, and that's obviously not going to complete the analysis, but that gives you an idea of where it's too symmetrical. So if we take that idea first, but then look at the center as we're drawing really quickly. So I'm manually showing what I'm thinking in my mind. So there's the center there of the form, and then I look, okay, where is the widest part width-wise? It's roughly a little bit at a diagonal, at an angle. Most of the time you'll see that, but it's not completely always. And then across that form here straight, I think I'm going to correct it in a moment and make it a little bit, dip the left part of it down where it gets a little bit lower, with the deltoid to the right attaches a little bit higher into the humerus. So that's going to be right there. I'll change my positioning there in just a moment. But that tells me in my mind, that's kind of what I'm thinking and seeing. Obviously, I don't see green arrows in my mind. But what I'm really seeing is a real quick analysis of where that form, is and can be. And so that deltoid popping up higher, coming over, and then hits that width mark in my mind, and then coming over through and back around, and then underneath. Now that's the widest part there as it moves over. It tucks over a little bit of the pectoral, and that bulge of the pectoral is so strong right in through there as it goes up to the deltoid and then down to the pectoral. And we'll kind of soften that up just a little bit for a sketch. And so we have our deltoid for the most part. And I'm going to make it a little bit longer, that first arrow, and a little bit, push that a little bit. It seems to be a little bit to me where we can go back and analyze. And you'll continue to analyze, and if you make corrections, that's why it's great to make corrections. Sometimes I'll make them as I make mistakes, as we all do, and then we just correct. Sometimes I will, and sometimes I'll just leave it if I think, well, it's not really that big a deal. I think you have to be careful when you're making little minor mistakes with proportion, scale, or whatnot. Sometimes you're analyzing a drawing. We're not making stiff copies, and so there's no artist I know that doesn't make a few little changes, whether he or she knows it or not, in their drawing. Here I just want to make sure it's a little bit more accurate. And so if you are too tight and too rigid and analytical, your drawings can look very, very stiff, and they'll look worse than maybe if you just slightly elongated an arm or a thumb, or like in this case, the breast form is a little big. I know it, but I don't really want to fuss with it and bother with it. It doesn't really bother me unless there's some reason to be super, super, super accurate. And sometimes it just stiffens it up, and sometimes you lose kind of the gestural quality. All right, so we moved on the deltoid. Now we're going to get this super big arm here for a woman, really large, forearm. And through here, she's leaning, kind of resting on this rock. And so we're going to look now and get the basics of this tricep bicep region, which is kind of a sausagey egg form. A look at the center here. Looking at that now, and it's slightly off in a tilt where we get the highest point, where we get the back of the tricep here, using the green marker to the back here, right there, the tricep, and then the bicep is roughly, that's obviously there, where we get our thickest point of our width, or axis of our width. So we're again using our peripheral vision, and then also obviously blurring that vision, or just using it really quickly. It's a very quick little process. It happens. I've been using this technique for 25 years, so every drawing roughly I've done through the drawing database has had this technique, and now we're just making it, illustrating it for our audience here to make sure people know it's really powerful. I think powerful technique. So with that tilt, you see the axis, the true widest parts, by looking at the center, looking at the inside, and then judging again, pointing out where the outside goes, and then the forearm begins to emerge. The extensors now coming over, brachioradialis and whatnot, but the extensors coming over, and this gets to be a strong egg form. And you're going to see me draw it probably a little larger than it needs to be, and I'm okay with it, and I change it later. Make a little proportional errors. It's okay to make a few changes to get the spirit of the drawing. As long as you're not, like, if the wrist and the hand were down below the buttock, or closer to the buttock, we have a problem, or if it's too narrow. But I can see later on I made the forearm a little wide. This is part of why that we use these techniques, so that when we draw and then we go back and we can change and correct. So now we're looking at the center of this form. I think I analyzed it pretty decently already. It's a little higher to the left and a little bit lower to the right, where the bulgiest part, or the thickest part of that muscular bulge, that's a grouping of the bone and the ulna, the radius, and also again the extensors and the flexors of all those muscle groups as we start to group them together. And so that's where they bulge out the most. And you'll notice Rubens, the lower part of the forearm, where we get closer to becoming tendon, they're muscular too. So Rubens and Michelangelo, even though Rubens was certainly softer in his female forms, give us these distinctive figures, whereas Michelangelo's, even the females, are based off of male proportions and musculature. They look like males. Go look at the Sistine Chapel reproductions, or if you're in Rome, Vatican City, go for it. And then Rubens gives us these wonderful Baroque torques and turns and twists, and everything is egg form, and really, really moves in this graceful, oftentimes fluid but chaotic and violent series of egg forms all over the model. So now we got the basic structure of the gesture, and also the forearm coming down, and you can tell how it bulges in and then it bulges out again. So let's look at that. So we can take this subform, kind of guess at it, but then look at the center now of that subtendon region of the forearm, where the muscles start to move into tendon, right in through. Let's see if I'm going to show it here. So here to here. Okay, I'll make a few adjustments here. I'll get to it in a moment. Okay, there we go. And so now we're going to look through that egg form. As it overlaps as a drawing form, those muscles do different things. And then now we'll go for the lower forearm, where we get close to the bottom part of those muscles of the tendons. And now we'll look at the center to help us out. So quickly, our eyeball goes there, and then we make a quick judgment peripherally. Where is it the widest? So we're going to drop down a little bit lower now. And you'll see that bulge on the right, it's very slight, the right part of the female's under forearm there, the flexors, and then on the top there with those muscles, the brachioradialis and extensor carpi radialis longus. No need to know those if you don't know anatomy. It's not really important right now. And we get that little bulge there. So that's like another egg form, and its widest point is where it touches the green, the line there, where we're thinking inside our mind. It's hopefully it gets you clearer to a cleaner representation of what you're after. And of course, this is not great just for master studies, but more importantly, your own studies from the model, the figure model too as well. I'll just put this back in a little tone, the ulna there. And so now the bottom of the wrist, we can even come back and see where the bone pops out of the ulnar, we call that the P there on the lateral side there, that little protrusion, and that's a width point, and we see that the bone tends to angle downward, and then it goes out in a box where the wrist comes back the other way. So right in through there, and then I'm just going to I'm not going to do all the fingers just so we don't burn as much time with the video quality, but this can be done axis in width, and using your peripheral vision can help with the palm of your hand. Now I'm showing the palm. If you look at her palm, you're going to notice that we're going to include the thumb region, the ball-like form of the palm. It's called the thenar region of the fat pad of the back of the thumb there, the palm. And you're going to notice that it's diagonally situated high right, low left. So here's what I'm looking at: the center of all the hand, right in through there, and then where's the widest part where I can find that egg form or that grouping of the muscles, and it really situates itself about like that, where that axis and width line is. So we're right in through there, and I'll make a mark there, so we'll have that there. And now we can kind of I'll just gingerly, gesturally put out the markings of the hands and digits of the finger, and we'll move on. So you can see where my initial gesture was, and I changed it, and you'll see that that the initial forearm is still a little wide. So I mean, Rubens really pushes me to go wide, and I'll actually would correct that back even on my own after the drawing. And so now I'm getting that eggy form in through where it's widest, and I could just gesture in the width of the hypothenar muscle grouping, fat pads around the pinku, that area there, and then just the gesture of the fingers, so we don't have to fuss with all that. But the closer you get in the detail of all these, all the digits of the fingers, all of that can be under the understanding that horizontal, vertical, diagonal alignment, and also axis and width and peripheral vision for your width marks can be done. It can really be done at any level, macro, the entire figure, or micro, getting into facial features or fingers or digits, and so that you can feel any part of your drawing. You can be confident that if you start to understand this technique, you'll understand it from a very much a level of controlling width, and also some scale in proportion too as well. Don't worry about missing little changes. It's okay. Things are okay in terms of small little changes. I will want to go back and reduce the size of that forearm a little large, but other than that, it's fine with it. I like to generally make the arm, especially the hands, a little bit larger than what I see them, just so that it works out a little bit. I'm a little bit more large hand oriented, just to give it a fullness. Sometimes we make it too small. Now I'm coming over here to this under part here, the oblique, a little bit over here, this part of the stomach. You can see that white area where she's in highlight, where Rubens puts that highlight. There's some fat pockets there. Even that one we can take on. You can see that the widest part is really very elongated left to right, kind of curves upward. And so I'll show you what I'm seeing. Here's the center that I'm seeing, and then here's a kind of a width there, a length of it, and the length way across the width there. So it's angled up, and it's pretty obvious, a very sausagey like elongated egg form. So if you've seen all the videos I've done for the database, one I've did about 4 or 5 years ago, just drawing simple volumes and solids and spheres and cubes and cylinders floating in space, and this is the reason why, so you can analyze them. So let's work on this lower abdominal oblique area, and we're going to analyze the width now across here from the belly region, the fat of the belly, back down through the coccygeal region, over down to where the buttock starts to touch the ground, and right before it starts to get flat, where she's really crushed by gravity and the weight of the situation. So there's the widest width part to that area there. So now I'm just analyzing that egg form from the top of the belly as we come all the way over and down, and then I can come up again. It just gets the back of that spinal area where it starts to really split into the erector spinae muscles, the iliosacral muscles there. As we now come down the back, it's going to straighten a little bit where it gets more bony, and there we get to the coccyx of the pelvis. Then it splits apart, maybe hard to see there, and then we're going to get that area of the buttock and through there, and then as the glutes split apart, we'll get down to the butt crack really in the cheeks there, and now we're getting a feel for that egg form all the way through. That's what we're looking for, is to be able to recognize and take these forms here in through and come on over. And so what I did there when I kind of did that little mark there, what I'm thinking about is I'm not looking at the leg, so I kind of marked that away. I'm looking at this egg form, and so now you see the widest part here. So if I look in the center here, right, all the way over is where that egg form is, the width on this end. So it really is kind of a wobbly, kind of oblong form that is nice. It works for us quite nicely as we move across here. And so there's where I see the width. Yours might be a little different. It's totally fine, but if it's got to be, you know, relatively close. So the end of the buttock in through here, that will grab roughly right, probably there, all the way over to where the pelvis ends and the oblique starts to attach to the pelvis in that marking where I show you. And that gives you the width that you want, or the fullness, or the thickness, or the bulge. If you know, so many ways to say that. We just called it axis and width, and I use peripheral vision as a statement because I'm always kind of looking, you know, wide at the wide view, and I wouldn't say blur my vision. I'm looking a little bit wider. Blurring is probably a little bit more extreme, but now we'll split the buttock a little bit where she's sitting down, flattens out on that ischial part of her pelvis, and then we'll come over and just shave this down a little bit with some shading. Push that down through a little bit here, buttock. Now just to get the feel. And that's how we get that. That's how we get that fullness, as we looked at each of these forms and broke them down into some more simplified volumes, and then used horizontal, vertical, diagonal alignment, and axis and width peripheral vision. Works really well. And I would say axis and width is more for egg-like forms, so it's a little bit exclusive, I think, to that. But it's a way to, I mean, you're still thinking about the volumetric figure, but we're not making it volumetricized or mannequinized. We're just really, you know, we're going for it. But even though we're using, in our minds, visually, we know we need to do that. So I'm just going to break down these forms a little further here, and you can see where that same thing kind of applies, where I'm breaking down these little bean forms of fat and muscle in through here, and the leg would fit behind that. This gives you that little extra oblique area in the top of the pelvic crest there. So I'm showing you now where we're coming through to the leg, and so the leg is now going to come and just kind of feeling where it fits through to the top of the eyebrow, right about over there. Kind of make a little mark there and come up with the leg, and then keep the leg simple. Sometimes it's just a very light straight line. We know it's going to get much more curved than what it is, but now I can look, once I've got where I want, I take a look at the center of the leg, where I think is the true center, and let's now look at it and find where its true width is. Well, it really is strong kind of curved diagonal, if you will, from the lower left at the last of the biceps femoris, or the hamstring part, if you will, to the top of the quad there, to the thigh, and you can see where that bulges. It's really pulled across. So you can do that in your mind. You can make a little mark here, and you can make and feel that egg form of those groupings of those muscles across the back of it. It's really bulging out. It's interesting, it's a very elongated figure, so it's imagined, it's fantasized, and then there's fullness in the buttock, and there's tinier breast than what I've drawn. They should be a little bit smaller, but then there's fullness and muscularity in some areas, but there's also still a layer of kind of this pearly white, sort of Baroque era fat of the aristocracy that many societal women would probably, I'm guessing, you can correct me if I'm wrong, aspired to, where the skin was pearly white and there was no it was certainly a class separation, unfortunately. But anyway, again, it's a different topic. But the thickness of these forms is uncanny, and their volumes and their roundness and egg-like form. So that's how I got that leg form pretty quickly. Now there's more information inside there, and we see that. So as we come down the thigh, we also feel that it gets a little smaller. It straightens out there to the sartorius. area in what we call the three-finger gap, which is a straightened area on this part of the leg. And we have this connection over as it comes in, and it starts to connect back into the tensor fascia lata area in the sartorius up and through there. So you get a little shadow, and that kind of has a certain ball, egg-like form too, as it's sort of inflexion here. With a little bit of roundness, you can see how it gives a little bit of value. And the light's pretty bright across that hip and upper leg there. And so we have that working for us. And then we'll come on down now to the belly and region and through here, just adding a little bit of detail, not doing any too much diagramming. We got the major part of the leg in through here. And now we can kind of come up and grab where the end of the leg is, those tendons occur, and then get the top of the knee with the patella and the femur part there, and the tibia fibula. I'm gonna leave that. Obviously, I've cropped in there so we can expedite. I want to do one more study with you, another Rubens figure. So I'm just going to do this part. But we can say now there's another area of the lower part of the thigh, the side muscles, okay, that we can start to get to. I'm just going to get this tendon start to going in through here and up and over. That biceps femoris tendon as it connects to the ulna through there. Here we go. And now I can see we'll do a couple of more axis and width inside the inner thigh. Now there's a second region that Rubens gives us, this little flexed region in relatively the middle of the leg, slightly closer to the arm where the thumb the thumb is. And I'm going to take not going to draw the hand. So looking right there at the center. So it's a different position. Now I'm looking at this area, and I'm looking right at the center, and okay, where is this width across? And it's roughly straight across, kind of curved, like so, if you will, or you could just draw a straight line. Right in through here is its widest point in there, and it's part of that vastus lateralis muscle that works on the lateral part, in this case the right leg. Excuse me, left leg, her left leg. And we see it width there, and then right through there where I'm making a little mark or shading mark, softer edge, where we see that. So, you can do the major muscle groupings or the forms, and then also you get into the subforms, which we've done already. So it's a good example already of some of the major form areas, but then we get into smaller areas where you get, form upon form or subform, and you see a model who's very muscular. Or there's a lot going on, fat pockets or whatever, and you get a lot of subforms. So there's the width of that coming across, and that comes on down, and it starts to get a little bit narrower the way he's got it with the form structure. So we can emphasize that a little bit. And then we can get that lower grouping as it gets closer, somewhat closer to the hip. So we'll come on down with that. And we'll group now. We've got that bulging one against the other. There we go. Rectus femoris against the tensor fascia lata, and then we come down. Now we've got this little extra bulge, and we'll start to see it. Sometimes I'll draw a little bit, and I'll get the outer edge, and then I'll look at the center, and I'll look at the other side here. And then we'll look at it across now. And it's pretty wide across there too as well. It kind of covers two little sections where it gets a little darker. But that's that extra bulge. And it starts to give you the rhythm of the leg and the feel of the leg. Even if you don't know a lot about anatomy, if you know a lot about form, your drawings can be very, very believable. Anatomy will give you that finished touch, but it's a long, drawn-out subject, and it will need constant attention over the years because you'll forget the names. I always have to go back. It's like, what was that again? Some days I remember it. Some days I'm like, it falls off my tongue easy, and other days it's like, I can't remember that. Now we'll get one right here in the hip here, and get that finished part of the glutes, the iliotibial tract in through here, and it's roughly more diagonal, or a little bit more diagonal than the other ones. It gets a little bit wider and push through, but it does. You can see how that pooches out, pops out with the highlight, and it's like a little bitty mound of flesh and fat and muscle. And where does it start? Where does it, where is its widest point left and its widest point right? That's what we're looking for. And I'm just going to spend a few more minutes here. And kind of tweak this. And that's about really it for this one. Just a few more. I could see a few more minutes in the video. About a minute or so left, and just to tweak it. So that was a good analysis. So things I'd go back and correct here. So I need to go back, and everything I think worked out pretty well. If I had to be a stickler, I would say the breasts are a little bit big, so I can go back and reduce them, the breast size. Or if you want, you can leave it. It's not going to erode the integrity of the drawing unless it's like 3 times the size of the head, or it's way down below the buttock. That would be a problem. The forearm is still a little wide, so I would push that a little bit. But some of the errors are made in a way that enhances some of the drawing. You could even leave them. If it detracts from it, then we've got a problem. Artists change all the time, so don't be afraid to change a little bit. And so given that, I think we're just about ready now to go on to the next Rubens study. We'll take a look at another one, and I'll draw and narrate. You can draw along with me and continue on with this particular technique a little bit further, and I'll just tweak this fat pocket through here. And of course we could go and spend another hour or so and just really reworking this drawing, but I think that we get the gist of the lesson here. Over and through here and get the light of the breast and the coarse shadow just a touch on top of it. All right, so let's move on to our next study. All right, moving right along now. So we're going to take on this Rubens painting here. This is an image of Bacchus and kind of a Bacchanalian fete or celebration, it looks like here. So, the reason I picked this image is that this particular technique, among many of them, is great for corpulent figures or larger, rounder figures. And when I was studying in LA at Art Center, we had every now and again we'll have a plus size model that could be quite large, and oftentimes it was really refreshing just to get a different body type. We had so many ballet dancers that were so muscular and cut that it was very challenging, and then to a rounder model, it was a little bit just a relief from that. And this particular technique acts as some peripheral vision to get your widths. Really works well for these rounder figures, especially when you're doing character design or you're drawing from representation or reference here. So we've got Rubens' figure, and I'm just working in through a very simple gesture action armature here. Kind of staying away from any heavy outlines for now, so we can get to the point of this particular lesson, this lecture. It is to get the flow of the feel, the kinetic movement of this particular position. Working the arm, laying in just the generality, the oval, the head, kind of central axis. And I'm going to put on a little bit of the neck and just the simple volumes of the figure. Now, I am using axis and width here, but I'm going to slow it down further when we get a little more detailed. If you've kind of fast forwarded the video a little bit, you see where we wind up, which is part of this pose. I don't do all of it just for time's sake. And so even in your gestural layout, you can start to use a quicker hand version of that. So as I'm flying through here, the first thing again I look at is the center of each major form grouping. and it can group many areas beyond just a thigh or just the belly region, for instance, but it groups all of them together. And then we look at, after we see the center, we look peripherally very quickly, and I'm looking for the widest edges that I can find on the model to show me where the width. And the great thing about Rubens' work is he has quite a bit of girthier figures that are really moving quite athletically for their size, and so we can use his images as a great caliber for this particular exercise, or as an example for this exercise. So just laying in a little bit of the calf gastrocnemius area, just simply gesturing on all this and giving a little bit of shorthanded volume and solids to that. So these techniques can go beyond the more specific reach of this exercise, but even really be part of what you do in your initial pass of volumes with the model, which is what I'm doing now. And I'm just speeding it up and not slowing down the discussion part of it, because we'll get to the specifics of this a little bit further and take on this model. So laying in the leg, a very sausagey, fleshy, plus size. Get a little calf in through here, and I'll just gesture in a little bit of the leg and foot. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'm going to give you relevant parts so you can get the idea, then you can move on to your own beginning studies. And again, this, in addition to horizontal, vertical, and diagonal alignment, helps quite a bit with scale and proportion for the most part. And then you'll still consider your change it and you interpret it, and that's great. As long as you're in a real close ballpark, that's what these are for. I think sometimes I've gotten comments from students, it's got to be exact, and we're not copying, we're analyzing, and we are giving expression to a reference, and so we have perfectly well within our reasons to change a little bit. All right, so getting the gesture of the forearm, coming down to the thigh. That thigh goes back a little bit further to the buttock. I'll change that. It's hard to see in that shadow, kind of where that cast shadow cuts down a hard edge. There's a little bit more of that buttock that goes through. We'll get to that further. So keeping it simple, keeping major volumetric parts of the body together. Feeling at the head axis, gesturing through the shoulder, onto the arm and elbow, looking at the elbow as a bony landmark to change the flow and direction of the figure. It's very two-dimensional. And then the volume part comes in very quickly to get to 3D right there very quickly, just to get a egg form within kind of a tube, and the hand becomes an oval. Later on we can make it into, or fill it through a box, etc. You can switch so many different volumes and solids as you're working one area. And then to show the belly region, the true center is pushed way over to the left, with the belly button, the sternum, and the pectoral part of the rib cage. So get a little bit of the platform. Looks like he's sitting on a barrel. I'm not sure what the child is doing. We won't go into that discussion. All right, so now we're ready. So the first place I'm going to tackle is kind of the chest region. So I'm looking at the very center of what I think is the overall form. Okay, and it's not where the nipples are, but it's the very, very center of it. And so what I'm seeing is a diagonal relationship from this end of the pectoral, roughly, or the breast, all the way over to that fat pocket, kind of underneath his bicep there. So that's where I feel that quickly across there. Let me define that by showing you the full form here, that full egg form all the way clear across. And you have to be able to think through other forms that are on top of it, that get in the way, that may overlap, etc. So you have to do in your mind a kind of gymnastics and remove things from your vision so you can see the feeling of it all the way through. Now with the left and right pectoral, these aren't nipples, these are just looking at the center of objects. So the width of the pectoral here that I'm drawing on the left is roughly, the axis point for that is roughly here. And now that gives me a true nice width point for that, and then I can come across here and then get that egg form rendered in as it hugs on to the rib cage and then falls forward and over to the side quickly. He's in slight contrapposto, but he's also just, that form is going to be heavier and be pulled because of the fleshy, real fleshy nature that it's going to be pulled downward. So for the right pectoral, working through the sternum here, so it hangs off the sternum and makes that little V shape above here in the notch here, and then also down below at the end of the sternum. It attaches there at the pectoral. There we go, 1 through 6 there. And then there's your center. Now I'm looking for width across here. It's a little bit wider, really underneath where that fat pocket is, underneath the. So I'm going to mark that further and a little bit more of a tilt where it attaches up to the sternal plate there. And then I give you an example of what I'm seeing and how I'm thinking through that. So looking at the center, looking peripheral, and then exposing the true nature of the form further to help you with these overall widths and also lengths, if you will, but it generally works more horizontally fashioned from left to right or right to left, excuse me, but also from a kind of a widening standpoint. Right, so we'll flesh this out a little bit further, no pun intended. Get under this undergirth here, these rolls of flesh that come through the pectoral, rolled around and back behind the lats and trapezius, pretty heavy. Put a little tone on there just to give it a little bit of a dimensional quality. Now we're going to reach over to the bicep here, the forearm, just to get a feel for that further. And so now we'll go to the deltoid to look at true center there. And he's tilted up a little bit higher as he's raised up slightly. The hand is on the hip, so I'll look and find that angle a little, and then I'll come back over and adjust to now the trapezius in the back a little bit, and then deltoid here. Side part of the deltoid, lateral part. And there's where I see the greatest degree of width, from the underarm area to the top part of the deltoid in the middle, and then getting wide, really wide across. So it becomes, the whole area becomes an oval-like form. It's slightly at 90 degrees, maybe a little bit off, but that's fine. But it gives you that ovaled kind of form. Now I'm not using the bicep for this one. I could have gone down to the bicep, but I group more of the bicep on its own to see that. So there's that true, more accurate reading of the deltoid or the shoulder right through there. So it crashes down. And then gravity drags it down, drags the bicep down, makes it, since it's fleshier, there. Now looking for the center of the bicep. And it's across, generally with the thickest part of the bicep and the head of the tricep, the lateral part there, that tricep. And so I go for that width. Now this happens a lot faster than when I'm doing it here. This is still pretty slow for me. Speed is not an issue. Accuracy and competency are more important than speed. So if you're not the fastest, it's not that important. And so we get that bicep and a little bit of the back coming through there, around the belly, and over to get a roll going. Those rolls are like little cylinders that are touching each other, and when they touch each other, they get a little bit of an opposite line. Form overlapped over a little bit, so we got a little bit more to the angle out, which is fine. And coming across now, I could have used a line there, but I don't. So we have the elbow, the epicondyle there, lateral epicondyle there, coming over. All right, so now looking at the forearm extensors and flexors there. So we see that right in the middle, not to the far to the left or to the right, but you have to think of the form kind of as a circle first, and then you find your center, and then you look to your widths. It's really not that complicated, actually, by making it more complicated than it is, but you just look to the center of the form, and then you can find that width where that bulge, that flexor bulges out there on the ulna side, and we come over to the extensor in here, or brachioradialis, and you see where that biggest bulge is. It comes across nicely like a tube. Put a little shading on there. We're going to come down with the forearm to the wrist, which wrists are their classic boxes. And this one in particular is angled, turned right at the ulna. You can see the bone sticking out the wrist. So we're coming on down, and we can use one here if we wanted, right into that forearm, but doesn't look like I'll show that. So we get a little bit of the hand as we have that tube emerging. And then we can do one for the hand. So if we look in the center area of the hand, we can see the extension of the egg form as the carpals are resting slightly on the buttock hip region. And we come around more deeply to the fat hypothenar part of the grouping of muscles, or just the pinky area. And so now we can get that egg form, widest there, coming around the egg form here a little bit wider, longer. There we go, coming over to that area. And we can add the fingers on. Okay, got that. We'll clean it up a little bit. Bring out the elbow. So now let's take on the massive belly region, the Bacchanalian grand feast here. So we're looking at the whole thing. Now we have to look at the center. The belly button is to the left. So I think of it kind of the whole thing as a circle in the beginning, and the center is right in the middle of it. You don't want to push it to the left, you don't want to push it to the right. I see the belly button lower to the left, but you can't use it as your guide. You need to use your very center, and then so you can use your peripheral vision to find the angle of that axis line. And if you look at that center and then you look peripheral, what you find is it's widest at the relatively lower left, and then also at the lower right, down where the shadow is by the forearm and the wrist in through that area. So now we can come across here and begin to run from the rib cage here downward, and then bulge out pretty quickly to the belly area. right through there. There we go. And then over, just as initial read. So what we have to do is relax our need to see all the detail first and just see the larger, bigger picture of the fruit basket, if you will, or the large fruit of the belly. It's kind of like a large pear or the back end of an apple. And then we're going to feel that belly body against the pubic region, the notch region through there, the pelvis, and how it's anchored off those bones. We have that. We come on down. And then we're feeling some of this form of the model, of the reference. And the belly button in shadow, where fat falls over the top of it. So you get this kind of key loop looking shape to it, and the belly button is hooded. So in this case, because of the fat on top, so it's in shadow, then I get a little bit of value in through there. I won't go crazy. Kind of a core shadow and form as the figure turns downward, coming on down there. We'll throw on a few more rolled details, fat rolls in the belly there. So look at those opposing lines, one against the other. Or another way to think of it, or deeper, is to thrust the idea of cylinders against the cylinder, or sausagey form against the sausagey form. But you have to have some opposite lines working so that you get them to contrast, and you get the pinch of the belly fat that starts to poach out. They pinch against each other. Right, now we'll take the legs. So we've got the length here, which is a little bit longer than in the back, so I'll correct that in a moment. Then I'm going to look at the center here, right here where I mark it, and try to find the large grouping of the quad muscles in the biceps femoris area together. And when you do that, when you look kind of where that larger highlight is of the leg and then look peripherally, you'll see then that the major bulge is kind of a curved tilt from the left now to the right, like I've drawn it. So we can come over and take the leg once I go back down there, fussing around with a little bit of that. Put those nipples on. We'll see how this leg's a little bit in the back by the hip and the buttock a little bit longer. There we go. So that works more as a shadow. And coming through and defining a little bit of the break of the muscles. So we got the major width. Now we're going to take this, and this is a cylinder-like form. So this egg form is like jammed in that tube, and I'll just cover this darker area where that garlandy growth is to cover the pubic region. And so now we're finally getting to it. Is we want to extend this egg form here, right there. The width all the way through in our vision. This is a big egg form. We want to see that all the way through. See where it tops out there and then moves left and right to the knee and then back to the thigh, and that's where it's lit on the top part a little bit. So that helps you get the width of that across to your viewer. That's important. So it's like an egg jammed into a paper towel roll. And we'll just dig out now where the nail or the kneecap, is going to be located, and a little bit of the length there to help in the direction of the flow. See the patella in through there. So now we can look at the patella region even. So you can break down all these parts, even the digits of the hand, the toes, the feet, the head. I'm not going to go into that great detail. You get the idea. This is about getting the major idea. But you can see now where the widest point. So when I look at the knee area and then peripherally look at where it's widest, I'm looking at this tendon on both sides where the sartorius and gracilis connect here on the left, and then further on the right where the biceps femoris and the iliotibial tract is located against that fibula. So it gives me that greatest degree of width right in through there. We'll start to render that out, thinking about the three-dimensional volumetric quality of it. Not so much anatomy. I'm talking about some anatomy, but it's more just a way to connect the vocabulary to what we draw a little bit. And we get a little bit of the bone coming through there. Gastrocnemius or calf, that wider part there. And hopefully you can see where this matters. What we call it, what we name it a little bit, and then what the form is, and then where its true fullest, fattest width is. So now, coming across here, looking through, rendering the kneecap a little bit, just to get some of that shadow play. So again, you won't see finished drawings with these little circles as the center and the arrows. It's again showing you, making manifest, making visible, rendering visible that which we do as artists that is completely invisible or only mental. But you know you're doing a good drawing when it's looking like the reference, the model, etc. And you're using these, you're going to be using these techniques. So it's opening a window to the craft of the artist's mind, which is important. So now we'll take the calf. It can go wider. So we'll look at the center, not there, but right there. Just a true kind of initial center, like a geometric center. And now we're going to see the width, which is going to be tilted top left, bottom right a little bit. And so right here, we're going to see, not quite that far, but we're going to see the largest width of the foot there, or the calf and the soleus. And so now that gives us a better opportunity to come over here and get it rendered more correctly and in full. So right through there, a little thicker. Okay. And then I'll come down the other side. You can see that muscle bulge a little bit as the model, as the Bacchus is starting to use that foot for weight and pushing down. So we have that. Get a little tone there. And then the back side here of where the back part of the calf is the fullest part here on the lateral side. In through here. And then we'll bulge that around as well. And so what you're going to find too now, you're going to see that the calf is going to have, what's interesting about Rubens, he plays up this part where I'm drawing right here, the lower part of the calf where you get the front muscles, they begin to make another little egg form. You don't see it as much on the natural occurring figure, but he overemphasizes that, and it's a real classic way of looking at form, which I love, and it gives you that extra bulge, that everything is rounded towards the outside. We don't take dips on the inside. So there's where the center of that form is, and you'll see that it's a little bit tilted the opposite way for width, that more so than the calf. So it's a little bit more across this way where it's truly wide as here, and also there. So there's a tendency to have one part of an extremity go one way with width, and it just turns and torques and goes the opposite way too as well. So now I'll just finish out a little bit of the gesture, or finish this top part of the leg out, finish the gesture of the foot, and then I think that'll be enough that you can get for a good demo, and then you could go on go on to your own. So again, this technique is so very valuable to looking at the fullness, the richness, if you will, the corpulescence of the form, or the fatness of the form. But it works for leaner individuals as well. And of course, you can apply this technique to just about anything you draw referencing from, or the live model. So I'm just gesturing out the foot here. I'm not going to go into great detail on the toe. So that's pretty much it with peripheral vision and axis and width of forms. I remember when I was taught this in Los Angeles, it blew me away, because I was doing it already some, but it made my drawings come alive because I was really starting to focus on it. And I hope it does for you too. All right, see you guys next time. Bye-bye.